All right, everybody, welcome back. Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. And as we've been kind of talking about throughout the day, an interesting report coming down today from Shams over at The Athletic. He reports that the Sixers are opening up Ben Simmons trade talks. We're going to talk to our Sixers insider, Paul Hudrick, from 97.3 ESPN.com. I guess things are starting to pick up around the Sixers. And this report today, let's get Paul's take. What do you make of the wording in this report regarding Ben Simmons, that they have opened up trade conversations surrounding him and have engaged with teams? Those sources also say, Paul, that teams have engaged with the Sixers about Simmons have been met with a high price threshold for the three-time All-Star. Quote, the Sixers want All-Star caliber players in return, one source with knowledge of the ongoing talk said. Shams goes on to write, make no mistake, interest across the league in Simmons remains robust. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, none of it's surprising to me. Of course, they're going to be open to trading him, and of course, they're going to discuss it with other teams. Like you and I have talked about it, Mike, and to me, Joel Embiid is probably the only player that I view as 100% safe on this entire roster. I could see any player being moved this offseason, and that's on top of just general NBA and like how things work with a guy like Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey is that kind of guy. He's going to be open to everything. He's going to explore every avenue and every option he has to try to make the Sixers a championship team. That's what he did in Houston, and that's what he's going to do here. So I'm not remotely surprised to hear that Ben Simmons, those discussions have been that are open now, and that they are discussing them with other teams. And I'm certainly not surprised that his value is still high. I get it. The playoff struggles. I get that this playoffs, it was historically bad, but this is still a guy who is a three-time All-Star, who is an All-NBA performer, who is, second for Defensive Player of the Year. All these things are still true. He'll be 25 years old going into next season. And the other thing, if you didn't see it, Mike, there was Mark Stein also just put something out, formerly of the New York Times. He just put something out talking about Ben Simmons and his value around the league and how other teams do it. You have to look at it like this. Remember, like the main reason the Sixers started the process, or part of the reason, I shouldn't say the main reason, part of the reason, a big part of it, they weren't able to attract free agents to Philadelphia. It's just something they couldn't do. Think about all the teams in the NBA that are fighting that struggle right now that can't attract that kind of player. Of course, all of those teams are going to be in on a guy like Ben Simmons, whether it is a Portland, if Dame Lillard wants out, if it's a Portland, whether it is the Wizards, with Bradley Beal, whether it's the Bulls, exactly. Those teams don't necessarily have a great track record of obtaining free agents on the open market. So their best option could be to take a chance on a guy like Simmons who's under contract, and maybe, while his value is the lowest it's been, it's still pretty good from what it sounds like, but the lowest it's ever been, to kind of try to take advantage and swoop in. So I would say I'm not surprised really by anything that Shams is reporting. And I to add to that too, with the Stein report, he also mentioned that Daryl Morey is going to be patient. They're going to want all-star. You don't trade an all-star player and not get any all-star players in return. That is bad business. That is bad policy. We've seen it with the Sixers, name it. Allen Iverson, Charles Barkley, Wilt Chamberlain, Moses Malone, all those guys. You need to acquire an all-star player in return.
No question. It sounds that that's the way. And if you believe this reporting, and we have no reason not to, it sounds that they want an all-star caliber player in return. So does that mean, hey, we can get more than a guy like Colin Sexton? I've had a lot of people say, why wouldn't you do Sexton? 24 points, point guard, can score. I mean, he is pretty much the anti-Ben Simmons. He scores. He wants to score. He wants the ball. He's fearless. What does that say if the Sixers are saying, we think we could do better than that?
To me, Colin Sexton...
And are you getting that vibe? Did they feel that they can do better than that?
Oh, for sure. I think we already saw that was like that. We've seen those reports of like that getting rejected, or him for Malcolm Brogdon, Ben Simmons for Malcolm Brogdon in a first getting rejected. And I agree. I wouldn't trade him for those guys either. It's not. I think, and I get it. People are just tired of Ben Simmons. It's Ben Simmons fatigue. They want him out. They just want him out. They don't care what they even get for him at this point. They just want out. They want different. And to me, that's not the way you win. If you get Colin Sexton in here, you're probably a second-round team still. You're not. To me, does Colin Sexton make you a finals team? No, he flat out doesn't. Yes, I get it. He shoots the basketball. He's a good scorer. He can create off the bounce. I understand all of those things. He's not a point guard. He's not a good passer. Like he's not a very good passer and playmaker. The numbers bear that out. He's not. Defensively, you would lose a ton going from Ben Simmons to Colin Sexton. And if you keep Seth Curry, a Colin Sexton, Seth Curry backcourt defensively, that would be a disaster. That would be one of the worst defensive backcourts in the NBA. And you're just coming off a series in Atlanta. Yes, I understand Ben Simmons struggles. I get all that. But part of the issue was, and Doc Rivers talked about it, they didn't have the size. When they went to the bench and when they went to Gallinari, they didn't have anyone that could handle Gallinari. So how's that going to work if you have Seth Curry and not Darius Garland, Colin Sexton on the court at the same time? So the cherry on the top of it too is he's 23 years old. Joel Embiid needs to win. They're trying to win now. If you're trading Ben Simmons, it's for a player that's helping you win right now. And I don't think Colin Sexton is that guy.
Paul Hudrick covers the Sixers. There's multiple reports out, one mentioning that basically the Sixers are opening up trade conversations here. So the fact that it's gotten to this point at this time, this early before the draft, you would imagine that would intensify as we get closer to draft day, no?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where if you look back on the previous draft the Sixers just had, Daryl Morey's first year, when Daryl Morey showed up a week before the draft, and then on draft day, and it's funny, a colleague of mine pointed this out, and I am having a hard time disagreeing. Did any executive have a better day this season than Daryl Morey's draft night, where he drafts Tyrese Maxey after he falls? They draft Isaiah Joe, who looks like a promising player. They get Paul Reed late. He was the second or third, the last pick in the draft. He wins the G League MVP. He pulls off the trade for Al Horford, sending Al Horford, getting Danny Green, pulls off the Josh Richardson for Seth Curry trade. I mean, that was that changed the course of this. Granted, I understand things didn't end the way you would have liked, but that went from a team that, to me, I thought they were a 4 or a 5 seed going into last season. They make those moves. They become the number 1 seed. So those moves were significant. And not only that, like I said, the draft went extremely well, where Maxey kind of falls into your lap and you don't, maybe he wasn't a perfect fit, but you take him anyway, just because of how talented he is and how good you think he can be. So yeah, I mean, Daryl Morey again, this is what he does, man. I mean, he's an aggressive guy. He takes chances. He's not afraid to stir the pot. He's not afraid to make moves in the interest of trying to make the Sixers a championship caliber team. So considering how busy he was on draft night last year, yeah, I anticipate a very similar draft night this year. Maybe not. We'll see how things shake out. Maybe it won't be quite as seismic, but he's going to do some things on draft night without question.
Now, do you think this report, Paul, focuses more on coming from the Sixers, and that what does that signify? It seems like the other reporting is coming from outside of the organization. Minnesota might have interest. They want him badly. This sounds like it's coming from inside Sixers land, no?
Some of it. I mean, the idea that they're holding out for an all-star caliber player. I mean, who knows? Maybe that comes from the Sixers camp because they're kind of sending that message out there, or maybe that comes from a team that's trying to acquire Ben Simmons, or an agent of a player, or something like that.
Do you think this is a purposeful type of leak here?
Maybe. I mean, I will say this: when it's someone like Shams or it's someone like Woj, I feel like it's purposeful for whatever side, whether it's coming from Ben Simmons camp, whether it's coming from the Sixers camp, one of the teams that wants to acquire Ben Simmons, whatever. When it leaks to one of those guys, to one of the big guys, that's certainly purposeful. Someone in one of these camps wants this known, and they want all the other teams to know it. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of what Shams is reporting is and that's what's tough about this time of year too, Mike, is how much of it is that what teams are saying because of how they're trying to steer their negotiations, and how much of it is genuinely, yes, this is the way it is. So it's really hard to decipher. And then you have, like I said, and Stein's reports, and Stein's a hell of a reporter as well. So you don't want to marginalize what he's saying. And not to say that his was, it wasn't like quite the antithesis of what Shams was reporting, but he did say that, hey, like, it seemed to me, at least, I mean, I don't know however you saw it, Mike, but to me, Shams was reporting basically like, it's almost like at least he made me feel like it's inevitable. When he uses terms like the writings on the wall, that makes me feel like, wow, they're going to make this happen. And then to see Stein come out a couple hours later and say, well, Daryl Morey also is prepared to be patient.
Yeah.
He was patient with James Harden. He was patient at the deadline with Lowry, and he'll be patient here. So, yeah, it's tough to decipher where it's coming from and who's saying what. But I think it's just you have to take it all in and just kind of decipher what you see and, against what you already know.
Right. Well, it's like a couple things. Like, you can make the argument that they have an offer on the table that they like. Like, hey, we're good with this, and we'll just try to keep drumming up interest. And if we have to, if they really want to trade him, right? Like, or, you'll just say, we don't like what we got, and we'll just keep him, but we'll leak this out there to try to see if somebody wants to move their all-star caliber player.
Yeah, sure. And to me, what I felt all along, and none of this reporting changes it for me. I still feel the same way. It's if you can get in it, obviously in a package, Ben Simmons being the centerpiece of that package. If you could send a package to Portland for Dame Lillard, to Washington for Bradley Beal, perhaps Chicago for Zach LaVine, if that's the kind of guy you can get, then Ben Simmons is going to get traded. If you can't get that kind of guy, then then you should keep him. And I think that's the right way to do it. Because to me, yeah, like I don't love I like Malcolm Brogdon. I like Colin Sexton. I like both of them as basketball players very, very much. If there was a way to get them on the Sixers without surrendering Ben Simmons, I would entertain that a lot more. But if I'm trading Ben Simmons, I need more value. And so I would need an all-star player. And that Brogdon's not quite there to me. I think he's a notch below. Sexton's like borderline, I guess you would say, but he's done it on a really bad Cleveland team, so I would like to see what he would do on a competitive team. Same with a guy like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, or even like one name I've seen thrown out there is like De'Aaron Fox. I don't know why the Kings would do that, but if they did, I would certainly entertain that because I think De'Aaron Fox is an ascending player, and I think he would fit very well here. But yeah, and then not only that, Mike, it's the names that aren't even getting thrown out there that we don't even know about that could be on the market or could be available. So right. It's just it's a lot to kind of go through, and we just don't. To me, I'm going to keep standing by that idea. It's got to be an all-star caliber player coming back to Philadelphia, whether it's for Ben Simmons straight up for an all-star player or it's a superstar player and it's a package of Ben Simmons. Either way, there's got to be that value back here.
So what's the next 2 weeks? Like, are these like the most important next 2 weeks coming up here? I mean, you got the draft, as we kind of hinted at, on the way, but if they get past the draft and he's not moved, so is it more likely or less likely that he gets would be traded leading up to the draft or on draft night or after?
My gut, this is just gut. I have no sources. I have no reporting on this, but I would think after, only because.
Wow.
Well, listen, because I do think Daryl Morey's going to be patient. He's not going to rush this.
That makes some sense, too, because you would think the Sixers don't want to trade Ben Simmons for a collegiate prospect. They want to get
absolutely. If they're going to trade for picks, like if the Sixers are moving picks, those picks aren't staying here. They're picks that are going somewhere else for a different. You know what I mean? Daryl Morey's not going to, to me at least, I don't see him like we talk about that the Golden State scenario. No, I don't want Golden State's 2 picks. I don't want them. Why? That doesn't help. That doesn't help Joel Embiid's timeline. That doesn't help the Sixers become a championship team unless you already have another team that would like those picks that you're going to move to get another player in here. That's the only way I'd see picks being palatable. And in that scenario, you might even be a 3-team, 4-team trade of some kind, which you've seen Daryl Morey is more than capable of orchestrating. He's done it plenty in the past, really complex, weird trades involving players and picks. So, yeah, I mean, I would just say after only because I don't think he's going to rush it. I think he is going to let things play out. And perhaps if you wait depending on how the draft goes and how some of the things go, maybe a team gets a little antsy or gets a little desperate, depending on how that all shakes out, and maybe you get more value that way.
Should be an interesting couple of weeks here. We'll see what ends up happening. Obviously, the report today that Ben Simmons, the Sixers anyway, are starting to engage, which means that they're definitely interested. They are taking your phone calls, and they will listen to your offers. We'll see. Some of the teams that Mark Stein had mentioned, I think he said, let's see, what do you have in there? Toronto, Minnesota.
Toronto was an interesting one.
Yeah, Cleveland, Indiana, Minnesota, Toronto, Sacramento are the 5 teams that Mark Stein kind of threw in there. So that's interesting. Yeah, Toronto would be an interesting one. Are you going to trade Ben Simmons for Kyle Lowry?
Maybe. I would think. That's one where I would be. Man, I'd be on the fence. Yeah, that would be one of the ones that would be like, to me, like Dame Lillard, Bradley Beal. I'm not even thinking about it. Kyle Lowry, I have to think about it. I'd lean towards doing it, and depending on how the other pieces fall, depending on what it does for you salary cap wise, what Lowry's going to sign for, depending on all of that, I would have to think long and hard about Kyle Lowry.
All right, plenty more on this. Of course, we'll keep it locked here with Paul Hudrick at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. And the Sixers all season should be very interesting. And as soon as these NBA Finals are in the books, which get back underway tomorrow night here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Paul, appreciate it, man.
Of course, Mike. You got it, man.
All right, and Paul Hudrick here on the Sports Bash. And when we come back, we'll look at tonight's All-Star Game lineups and take a look at that here on the Sports Bash.